Last time on the Channel 64 SMB, we finally moved on from our cozy little starter house and kicked off a brand new farmland, giving our cows a proper home and finally starting to reshape the landscape around us. But today, I want to turn my attention to this little stretch of land just above our starter house. It's currently looking quite bare, and what I want to do today is kind of address one of three challenges. And the first is that I want to better connect up with our neighbors on the server. And I think that a really immersive and fun way of doing so would be to build in a minecart station. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. The area above should be perfect for this, but before I can get too far ahead, I need to actually address the second challenge of today, and that is to begin leveling up our infrastructure. So we need to move beyond our pitiful starter farms and actually build in some proper redstone ones. And I think a perfect place for doing so would be in this area beneath the hillside. So I'm going to build in a bit of a cavern so that we can kind of build in some of the main farms. And then our final task for today is to actually explore some of the new features added into Minecraft 1.21.5, as this server's finally been updated to it. And I'm itching to actually kind of explore and see how we can kind of use some of the new blocks in and around our base area. Cavern area now complete, but before we can go any further, we need to actually head over to the Nether for the very first time actually on this world for me, as I am lacking on any kind of quartz, and we desperately need some in order to construct up the redstone components for the farms for today. So I'm going to be using our neighbor Megatronix portal. I have to say, it looks kind of sus, but at the same time, it looks totally epic. So yeah, I'm going to hop on through here, but boy, can I tell you that I absolutely hate going to the Nether. I always feel like every step could be my last. It's always dangerous, and I have no backup gear. And I did actually have a few close calls when actually searching for quartz. I almost very nearly fell into the lava lake down below, so yeah. But then again, I thought I'd chance it yet again, and I got off lucky this time, but maybe not so much next time, we'll see. So anyway, I kept on exploring and tried to find as much quartz as I could find, just enough to really kind of keep me going. So hopefully enough for all the farms, plus a little bit extra, so that I don't have to come back here, hopefully at least for a little while. Sometimes you really have to kind of lose yourself before you can find yourself, and I got quite lost in the Nether, and I came through a random portal, and I have absolutely no idea where I am. But the first thing that I have noticed is that there are a lot of new blocks from the Spring Drop update, so I'm definitely going to take advantage of that, because there is one particular one that I am really keen to find, and that is the Firefly Bush. So I'm going to try and find that, but at least for now, the only thing that I was able to find was leaf litter, the new wildflowers, and the bushes. So we'll keep on searching whilst we make our way home and see if we have any luck at all. It's time to get back to business. So what I'm going to do now is actually start constructing up some of the resources that we're going to be needing now that we've got that much needed quartz. But as much as we're able to kind of produce like most of the components that I need, there is one thing that we're still missing quite a bit of, and that is iron. I don't have an iron farm, and I don't really have much supply of iron in general, so I'm actually going to have to make a little bit of a trip actually out of my area to the starter area, which actually has been called on the server Hodgepodge, and it's basically like a town that sprung up around the spawn area. And it's where like everyone's been building in their shops. Now, a lot has changed here since I've last been here. It's actually been a few months for me personally. Been a little bit absent due to some personal reasons. So it's good to get back and actually do some exploring. But the shop that I need in question is this rather cool looking one from Loki. Oh gosh, I do this every time with these trapdoor, like double door things. But anyway, yeah, so what I need to do is buy up some iron, and yeah, so I think I'll just grab a few stacks for the time being. Just enough to really kind of make me like tie me over for now. And I may as well buy up some powered rails whilst I'm at it, because I also don't have much supply of gold, so this is going to come in handy for later on when we actually start on the minecart station. So this is perfect. I have a funny feeling I'm going to end up spending a lot of my diamonds in Loki's shop. With my little shopping spree now out of the way, we now need to head down to this little area beneath our base to actually start gathering up a little bit of lava, since for the bone meal farm and moss farm, we actually need some for the stone generation component of the farms. And as I haven't got any yet, this is going to be perfect, because we can pretty much have enough for the farm itself and probably a little bit extra so that we can actually probably make a little bit of a renewable lava source of our own, just in case we need any more in the future. So we're now actually ready to get started. So I'll start off with the bone meal farm, and mostly because it is going to be pretty much useful for every other farm that we might make in the future, because a lot of the things that I need are mostly some more of the sort of natural resources, so they pretty much all need bone meal to actually sort of farm them up. And I know I could technically use like one farm and toggle it between bone meal generation and moss collection, but I don't actually want to do that. I actually want to have a bit of doubled up capacity, so keep this one solely for bone meal, and then make a pretty much identical one but slightly adapt it to actually gather up any kind of moss. And I suppose the plus side of well is that we can easily kind of switch between normal moss and pale moss. So I've kind of got the second one in place now, and I've basically hooked them up together. So if the bone meal farm has it enabled, it will start basically trickling in bone meal to kind of fuel up the moss farm. So that is going to be perfect. I think we will have to do a bit of AFKing to actually gather up enough to kind of last us for a little while. I've also almost finished completing building up a bamboo farm, so that means that we now need to start tearing down this little plantation of bamboo that's been left out in the open. It's of course looking pretty ugly, so it's going to be quite nice to kind of clear this up, and that means then we can actually start to get this planted into the farm itself. Though, although this might not look like a massive farm, to be honest, I think it's going to be more than enough for what we're going to need, because it's kind of one of those small farms that kind of chugs along in the background as we have the area loaded up. It's just going to keep kind of going, and I think it's going to fill up in no time with plenty of bamboo. And I have added in a bit of a auto crafter circuit just to kind of combine it into the actual bamboo like blocks. And I've also done the same with a sugarcane farm where I'm combining it into paper, because I probably will want to build up a lot of bookshelves in the future. So for that, we're going to need lots of books. So yeah, paper is what we're going to need. I am actually itching to get started with the minecart station, but before I can actually really get going, I need to actually figure out exactly where it's going to go and what I need to clear out of the way. So I'm actually using a mod called Limatica, and it's actually really useful for building in survival, where you can build an overlay of a build that you've designed in a creative world, and it also gives you a helpful list of all the resources that you need. So sometimes I do like to build directly in the survival world, but sometimes I kind of want to spend a bit more time sort of like ironing out little details and things in a creative world, just kind of like figure out things like block palettes and just have a real play around really before I actually go into a survival world and build it. So it's a super useful mod for figuring that out and kind of planning where you want everything to be. We're on to now the final hurdle before we can actually get started with the main build project of today. But whilst I was on my little side quest to find some terracotta, I actually found some of the new firefly bushes. So that is awesome, because these were definitely some of the main items in the new update that I was particularly excited to find. And they are definitely going to add so much more ambience and atmosphere into our little like terraforming and landscaping that we'll probably be doing a lot of in this episode. And I also found some of the new dead dry grass stuff, so that's also going to be pretty cool. I think I have an idea of a use for it, so I'm definitely going to collect some whilst I can. And then it's on to the Badlands so that we can collect as terracotta to at least last us for a while. Certainly enough for today's project and maybe a little bit extra, but I've not actually got any shulker boxes at the moment, so I'm very much limited to whatever capacity I've actually got in my inventory and of course in my ender chest. So that's probably gonna be something we might have to do on a live stream or something and venture into the end, because I'm not interested in the light trays or anything like that, but I am really missing having a good supply of shulker boxes. I am so easily distracted. I was on my way home and I came across one of the new cow variants that they recently added in, and they look incredible. So I couldn't resist and I had to hop in my boat, grab one of the new cows, and then make a pathway back through to the ocean, and then take the perilous voyage thousands of blocks back to my home. Now that we've actually made it back home, it's time for us to lead our new cow friend over to the barn area to join the rest of the cows, and then we can hopefully breed them up and see if we can get some more of the same type. So I then fed him some wheat and mixed in with the others, and then lo and behold, we have a new calf of the same type. And my goodness, it looks so adorable. Oh, that is perfect. So I'll wait for them to grow up, and then hopefully we'll add a few more to our collection over time. And whilst we're at it, I think I may as well add a few of these firefly bushes to our starter base area, because I think it's going to go in very nicely with the rest of the landscaping that we previously did. And I love this new addition so much. I mean, even in the daytime, it looks brilliant. Just that slight pop of animation and color difference, it just stands out so nicely. And I'm definitely going to add a few of these kind of mixed in the surrounding area. I mean, they look all gorgeous. So yeah, I'm very happy with that. But now that we actually have a few of the new cows bred up, I'm actually going to pop over now to my neighbor Peepop, and they've been really busy building out this sort of Wild West style base, and it looks absolutely incredible. But as I think that they have a herd of cows somewhere around here, I think I'm going to leave a little gift for Peep and leave this cow somewhere for them to find, because hopefully that will go down quite well. But this place looks absolutely incredible. I think I could just sit by this campfire and just take it all in for a while longer. But yeah, so we'll drop off this cow and then we'll get back to business. It turns out when I said earlier that we were onto the final hurdle before we can actually start building, I was very wrong, as it turns out that I actually needed a load of copper that I'd completely forgotten about. So what we need to do now is we need to make our way into this trial chamber, and hopefully we can sneak in undetected and gather up a bit of copper and then get out of here. But let's just say that was kind of like the intention, but it quickly did not end that way, and it wasn't long before I started accidentally triggering in the spawns of mobs and started getting into a bit of a battle for my life. And I also forgot very quickly that you can't fire like arrows at a breeze because it just deflects it back at you. So yeah, luckily I learned quickly from my mistake, and I started then fighting back and before defeating him and then moving on. But the worst mob, I think I have to say, in this whole trial chamber, it's got to be these new bogged, was it bogged, like skeleton things, the ones that are poisonous, because damn, they hurt when they hit. And well, not just because my armor suppose is not great, but the fact that we also get the poison effect as well just makes it all that much more perilous. So I was trying to kind of quickly as possible take out as many of them as I could. And of course, I'm also very clumsy, so I kept falling down holes at the same time, which absolutely did not help. And I was a few times where I was very low on hearts, and I thought I was not going to make it. And thankfully, we actually came out on top. I then made use of the keys that I collected from completing these spawners, and then tried to see if I would get any interesting loot at all. However, I was pretty disappointed because what I ended up getting was pretty much a load of junk, but still, the experience was actually quite fun despite not what I was originally looking for. The copper obviously is my main goal, so anything extra is just kind of a bonus at this point, really. So with the trial chamber pretty much completed and most of the spawners sort of finished out, I was then able to actually cover up a nice bit of copper. So I collected up at least a good mix of the already oxidized and the unoxidized, just to have a bit of variation in my supply. And I am going to need a little bit of both anyway, and then we can get back to things. But we actually have a new problem now, and that is a severe lack of beeswax. You see, although we've got a good supply of copper now, I need to actually remove the wax that's currently on them because I need these copper blocks in the oxidized state to kind of work with our minecart station. And as much as I hoped that I would find some lurking in one of my chests, I think at this point I'd already had the clue of what would be the answer, and that is that I have pretty much none to my name. In fact, all I could find was pretty much a few that I somehow had in my ender chest. So that means that we're actually going to have to go on another side quest to build up a honey farm so that we can actually get up a supply of wax in order to keep the copper in the state that we need. Now, unlike the other farms that I built in the cavern underneath the hillside, I actually think I want to take this as an opportunity to actually build something else in our base area. So actually have something a bit more aesthetically pleasing to look at, but obviously have the function of also being our bee farm. So I need to collect up a bit of wood first so that we can actually get started with this. And I have an idea of what I'm going to do. And I have an idea of where we want to build it. So I'm actually going to build it over in the area
next to our barn and our wheat fields, because I actually think it could fit this spot rather nicely. It does, however, mean that we'll have to move our little flock of sheep. I mean, it was probably going to be the case anyway if I actually wanted to finish off this little area that we've got here. But yeah, we'll give them a little temporary place to sort of live for the time being. And then in the future, we'll think about something a little bit nice for them like we did for our cows. I am so happy with how this has turned out. I'm not really best sure how to refer to it as, so I'm thinking probably beekeeper house probably makes the most sense. I mean, it's kind of what it's turned out to be. It's kind of a little bit similar actually to our starter house, so I kind of imagine this as being somewhere here where our beekeepers can reside. And it has actually got a little upstairs area, so maybe that's kind of perfect for it really, but obviously it's just the right size to actually hold our honeycomb farm. So kind of what I want to do now is just add in a few like flowers and stuff and like trying to like prettify up the whole area surrounding it, because obviously bees, they love their flowers, so we want to add a lot of those. And yeah, but this is looking pretty good. But the last thing we need to do quickly in this area is to actually move our sheep over into a little temporary holding area so that we can free up the area immediately outside of the beekeeper house. And then what we need to do is we need to actually find some bees. Now, luckily, previously I'd actually found some kind of like hovering around on the opposite side of the bank. So I headed over and then I grabbed up a couple so that we could actually begin breeding them up and then fully stock up our farm and get it up to full capacity. I've been busy kind of breeding away the bees to kind of build up the numbers a little bit, and I've also been AFKing in the farm in general, and I've now finally got a good supply of honeycomb. So what we need to do now is we need to actually make the most of this and actually strip back some of the copper that we've used in this build into the exposed state and then actually apply that honeycomb so that we can actually keep it looking really nice, because that exposed state just looks so nice when coupled up with all of the acacia and the red sandstone. So yeah, I think this is actually really looking pretty good now. So now we can actually move on to the main thing, which is actually get ourselves ready to actually start constructing the minecart station. And this is the bit that I've been most excited for. Do you know what is really fair to say is that I have really pushed myself outside of my comfort zone when it comes to this build, and I've really been trying to use a lot of different sort of building techniques and like mixing different block palettes together to kind of build up the station as it is here, and I am actually really chuffed to bits. So I've been experimenting for quite a while in creative mode. I mean, I'll be honest, I spent way longer than I care to admit just kind of like tinkering a lot, trying to figure out what worked and not. And I've never done stuff like blend like moss and stuff into the walls and things, and I am really happy with it. So I am so glad I was finally able to actually get this built in the world. So we've kind of got now the exterior all looking pretty good, and I have got this stairway kind of going upstairs. Now the interior it's pretty empty. I'll be honest, there is nothing inside of here. I do want to do something in here, but I don't think I have the energy right now. So I decided to kind of leave it as it is for the time being. I kind of really focus on the main function of the building and the exterior and stuff. So this is why I brought up the platform here so that we can start to build in some tracks and things. So we will probably come back to the interior, and I'm going to say truthfully probably in another episode, and we'll figure out what we want to do. But we have a nice big area in here, so we'll have to have a little think about what we could actually do inside of here, because yeah, there's a lot of space, and you know, perhaps we could actually start thinking about moving out of our little starter hut and into here, because yeah, there's a lot more room for us to actually work with. But I do need to address a couple of issues, and one, you'll notice how the station is currently floating off the ground, so it's looking pretty bad at the moment, and there is a good reason why, and that is because of where I wanted to have this sort of the tracks position, so the elevation of it kind of like align with the terrain that we have to work with. So it kind of made sense to kind of build the station up a little bit in this spot. So I figured it'd be pretty much easy enough to kind of adapt the landscape and kind of fill it in around it. And that's exactly what I've done here. So it didn't actually take that long. So yeah, so now that it's kind of not floating any longer, we have actually a bit of space to actually work with. So I've made a little bit of a start on the initial rail line, and I'm actually trying to make it look like a real life one so that it looks a little bit more authentic. But obviously, as we're in Minecraft, we actually are going to have the actual Minecraft rail tracks running either side of this track, so that we have somewhere for us to actually stop off at our station. And then, of course, if we ever want to add on an extension to connect it with other players in the future, then we can have a separate track that kind of leads on as well. So I think that will work really nicely. But what I need to do now is I need to actually take this track slightly down this sort of the hillside so it reaches the sort of same elevation as the lower area as we get towards MicroPig's base, who's just along down from us. So yeah, but I think this is actually looking quite good. I'm intentionally keeping it quite minimalistic. I mean, obviously I will do some landscaping and detailing and everything, kind of like to tidy this whole area up and make it look really good. But I think at the moment, as it stands, this is actually looking quite good. So I'm just kind of replacing out a few blocks here by adding in some barrels, because I think barrels actually looks really good at the sort of the lower and the top part of this sort of the pillar structures, just to add a little bit of variation. I think that looks quite nice. And then comes the actual fun part. So we now actually need to start laying in the actual rail tracks. So I'm going to add in a detector rail and one of these ejector rails at our actual platform edge, so that when the minecart actually comes in, it'll automatically drop us off on the platform, which I think will be pretty nice. But on the other side, I'm going to make a bit of a setting off point. It's a little bit annoying that we have to kind of make like a block that's kind of sticking out up on the top of the track. But considering that's kind of the only way to set a minecart off, it's going to have to do. It doesn't look too bad, and we're only going to need it really outside of any kind of platforms where we're actually sort of launching off from. So yeah, I don't think that's going to look too bad. We're now going to actually fill in the rest of the tracks and also add in some powder rails sort of spaced in between the normal tracks to actually give ourselves some actual momentum as we're going along our rail lines. And then once we've done that, we can go and give this a quick test ride. So yeah, this is looking pretty good. I'm very happy with this so far, but of course we will have to have a bit of a job on our hands to actually do some proper landscaping and tidy up the whole area, at least initially by the actual minecart station, and kind of bring this to life a little bit more and make it look a little bit less jarring and sticking out of the landscape. Because yeah, I wanted to make this look like really well blended into the landscape itself, so that it's just a part of our whole base area, and it feels like joined up and connected with everything we do in the future. It's kind of funny how sometimes things can seem kind of daunting to you at some points, particularly in Minecraft, like certain ways of building. And for me, it used to be landscaping. But what I've actually found is over the last few months, I've just enjoyed more and more actually getting into the proper flow of landscaping. And I might not necessarily be the best at it, but I have really enjoyed it. It's actually kind of therapeutic, just kind of like working it out as you go along and just trial and error, because you can't really pre-plan anything. You kind of just need to kind of get a bit of an idea of the sort of blocks and everything you want to use, and then just kind of really go for it. So that's kind of exactly what I'm doing here. So mostly I'm just starting off by adding in a bit of gravel and the pale moss directly by the actual rail track, because I think that makes the most sense, because on a typical railway line you'll see probably a lot of gravel actually along the actual tracks itself, but alongside it you tend to have a lot of like sort of dirt and stuff, and like kind of like worn out patches and things, and little bits of like grass and other stuff like growing up amongst it, and ferns and things. So that's kind of what I'm also trying to do here. So I'm kind of transitioning into the sort of the coarse dirt and the packed mud and a few of the path blocks as well, kind of dotted in and amongst it. I'm trying not to go too heavy with the path blocks because they can be a little much, but a few of them dotted around actually looks quite nice. And then I'm just going to add in some of the new bushes and some ferns, and obviously a nice bit of grass sort of dotted here and there. And I think that actually has the desired effect. Just like a subtle bit here and there, I think is going a long way. And then what I need to do really is I need to actually start by adding a bit more of like I suppose, like growth around the track area, so make it look a little bit more overgrown, sort of like as you go further along down from the tracks, just so a bit more of the sort of tall grass and other stuff sort of growing up along here. And then of course mix in a nice bit of moss to kind of bring it all together a little bit better. I think moss just adds a nice bit of variance and stuff, and it always looks pretty good when you're sort of blending into the sort of the surrounding areas, because of course with the standard grass blocks you have the annoying issue of there being the dirt face sort of on one of the exposed sides, and it doesn't look quite as nice, whereas when you've got the moss kind of extending downwards, it just kind of feels a little bit more complete and blended in and stuff. But what I'm also going to do is I'm also going to add in a few shrubs and stuff. So I've already done a bit of this down in my starter area and it looks really good. So I'm going to do the same up here and just add in like a few little bushes and stuff, just kind of dotted around the place. Again, not too many, just a few here and there, just to kind of just really add in a bit more like foliage and life and stuff into it all. And then we can kind of like fill in with some like flowers and stuff. So lilacs is always one of my go-to. So I definitely need to farm up a few more of these so that I have enough to go around. Something about the lilacs, they're quite appealing to me. They're just a nice pop of color and not too in your face. I always find like the roses can be a little bit heavy with like the texture and the color sometimes, but the pink or whatever of the lilacs just always looks quite nicely, and they kind of go in quite well with like the bushes and stuff, just sort of here and there. And then really we are kind of onto like the final stretch where we can add in stuff like some like some berry bushes and things like that as well, because once those grow up, although they are a little bit prickly to walk through, I mean maybe they could be like brambles or something like that really, or we can imagine that they're brambles or something along those lines. We have a few of those spread in amongst things, and then of course we need to make sure we add in some of the firefly bushes as well, because this is going to look really cool, like really ambient, and like add a nice bit of atmosphere as we're like riding our minecart line into the station at night. I mean, that's just going to look so beautiful really coming in. So yeah, definitely need to add in a load of these, and I'm really glad we can actually farm these up as well, because when I first heard that they were adding into the game, I was kind of worried that they would kind of be like non-renewable and we'd have to keep like foraging for them every time we want them. But the fact that we can actually bone meal them is really nice. And then also I'm going to add in a bit of leaf litter as well. I figured I might as well go all in with all the new spring drop updated like blocks and stuff that have been added in. So yeah, definitely a few of the leaf litter sort of items or whatever dotted about. And some of the wildflowers as well, because they look a little bit nicer than the generic flowers that you typically get when you bone meal the ground and all that. So yeah, definitely going to add a few of those sprinkled around all over the place. I also need to kind of fill in a little bit of the landscape because there's a few little gaps where it's a little bit jarring. But yeah, this is looking pretty good. So I think probably one of the final things that we need to do is we actually need to think about lighting up this area a little bit, because right now mobs are undoubtedly going to spawn and it's going to get a little bit dangerous at night. So I've come up with like a little lantern design, so I think that we could add a few of these dotted around. It's nice and simple, nothing too extravagant, but yeah, I'm just basically creating like this little lantern type thing where we can hang a couple of lanterns either side. So yeah, if we add in some trapdoors either side of here like this, then I actually think it's going to look quite good. And I'm going to kind of mix things up. So sometimes I'll add like a chain and then the actual lantern. And some of the other ones I was hanging the lantern in directly so that we can kind of have like a bit of variation. Yeah, it's pretty simple, pretty basic, but I think it has the desired effect. So in fact, yeah, actually, let me just adjust this one actually so that we can have one hang a little bit higher than the other, because yeah, I think that actually, yeah, I think this looks pretty good. So this is going to be really nice. So yeah, we're adding a few more of these sort of like up and along the track, just to sort of keep those light levels up and keep ourselves a little bit safer. And I think that's going to look really good. And I think, again, it's going to look really kind of ambient and everything as we sort of ride on in. And just like looking up and down the tracks right now, this is looking absolutely gorgeous. I am loving this. I mean, come on, this is coming along so well. And again, this is exactly why I enjoy landscaping. It's just, you start off and it can be a little bit hard sometimes to get going, but once you actually get started, it's just like, it's hard to stop. It's addictive. You just keep going, and there's so many little bits you can add in. And probably what I want to do in the future is add in some actual like custom trees and things. But for the time being, I think this looks really good, and I'm really happy with this. Now that all the landscape and everything around the station is looking really good and much more complete, I want to turn my attention, if I could stop myself falling down random holes, actually turn my attention back to the actual station for a bit, because although it is looking pretty good and we have a really nice platform and the tracks are obviously leading in, it is actually looking kind of empty and bare at the moment. And there's one notable missing feature that I think would go a long way. And that is some actual benches for our passengers to wait at for, you know, the minecarts or whatever to arrive into the station. So yeah, we definitely need to add in a few benches and other little details and things along the way so that we can kind of fill this out and just make it feel a little bit more alive. Yeah, so something really simple like this. I actually quite like using campfires in this way because it's just, I don't know, they look a bit more interesting than just slabs. Slabs are a little bit bare, but having the texture or whatever of the campfire, it just ties in a bit nicer with the station itself. And yeah, that's looking pretty good. So as we wrap things up with a few extra final little details just around the station itself, I guess I should really kind of go over what my plans are next. So obviously we made a really good start on the train station, or minecart station should I say, and I'm definitely feeling very inspired for what we could do next. But obviously at the moment the actual rail line itself doesn't actually go anywhere much. It just ends just further down the terrain towards MicroPig's base. But obviously in the future we want to actually connect up with our neighbors, so probably in the next couple of episodes what we'll end up doing is we will actually meet up with some of our neighbors and start planning where stations and stuff can go and where the actual tracks can like lead into and traverse through and all that fun stuff. And then we'll actually have a proper, like, you know, a fun experience of being able to hop in a minecart and actually get around to any of our neighbors really in the area, because we've got quite a few players actually in quite a smallish sort of area. So a minecart station, it should just be perfect to properly link up everyone. So I'm very excited for that. But I think really we are at a really good point to sort of wrap things up for today's episode. So as much as I'd love to carry on, I am definitely running out of time at this point. I'm also well overdue really on this next episode. I've been absent for a little while and it has been great to get back into the swing of things, but really I think we've got to leave things here and then we'll carry on in the next episode. So really all I have to say is thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed the episode, make sure to hit the like button, leave a comment and subscribe. But until next time, I shall see you later. Bye bye.